overall about the documentary, as far as, do you feel like it really encompassed the severity of the issues going on there, having been
Yeah.
raised there?
It's right what you say, that it gives a really good look inside of the community, which is important. It's important to be able to see the way of life, and then you can try to understand how these people live and why they live the way that they do. There was some footage that I hadn't seen, which was really disturbing to me. For example, you've got children who Neville Cooper / Hopeful Christian is speaking to, and he's preaching to them in this very intense language, and he's saying parents need to break the will of their own children, and the greatest sin that a child can ever have is that he would want his own life or want his own will. And he's saying you need to be filled with the fear of God. And he's using this highly emotive language, and he's sitting in a room full of children. And if you've watched the Devotion documentary, you'll know this scene. So you've got children there, and that's a really good example of how these children are being shaped and what they believed, which answers a few other questions. So we've now got, in that room of young children was a boy called Luke Vella. Luke Vella now sits on Devotion, and he defends Gloriavale's way of life. He sits there with his wife, Angel Vella, and he says, oh, well, we are just simple people who want to live in the way we want to, which is a little bit different to everyone else. And we just want to raise our children the way we want, basically, is what he's saying, and raise our families in peace, which is something that Dove says on the show. Dove Love, as you know, she's a Gloriavale celebrity, still living in there, and my cousin. So you've got Luke, who's been shaped by Neville Cooper in this way, now defending the way of life and saying these are the reasons that we want to live this way. As Luke is saying this, you see a picture of a man praying, that man being Joshua Disciple. Joshua Disciple is a man who has abandoned his wife and all of his children in order to stay in the Gloriavale Christian community. So they live out in the world now, and he's chosen that because he believes it's God's will. So you're getting these really contradicting statements. You've got like the reality of what's happening, and then you've got what Luke Vella is saying, and then you're looking at Luke Vella's background, and you're seeing how he has been shaped by the ideologies that Neville Cooper has given him as a very young boy. And that calls into account some questions, right? How much can we believe what Luke Vella is saying when we have this full picture? And this is what I feel the documentary missed. There was so much missing information about the full picture. And Dame Julie Christie, who is the TV producer of the show, says that she's very proud of the balance. She thinks the best documentaries are ones that show both sides of the stories, and the user and the listener can make up their mind. That's very interesting for me to hear from her, because she hasn't shown a full picture. If you want users to make up their mind, then the picture needs to be fuller, and it needs more details, and it needs to not be a 3-part show. It needs to be an entire series that can really capture all of the individual stories. So one, I think it's far too short to try and paint any kind of full picture, but I also think there's some issues around how it was produced. So as you know, I agreed to be a part of the documentary. I think it's important that we have our voice and that we talk about what's happened to us and tell our stories. However, Dame Julie Christie was she was asked a question by a contributor for Radio NZ, and she was asked, point blank, is Gloriavale a cult? Her answer to that was, and then there was silence. And they asked again, is Gloriavale a cult? And she said, I don't know what it is. I think that's important to know for the listeners and the viewers who are watching this show, because that is the person who produced and oversaw the entire production of this for Paramount Plus TV. So then we've got even more questions around, well, what did she have to agree to actually finally get access to Gloriavale? Gloriavale have not opened their doors for a long, long time, because they believe the media is going to skew their opinions. They are going to be thrown under the bus. They don't want that. They want to be able to control the narrative and protect their image. They are obsessed with protecting their image, and they have to protect their image to preserve their way of life. They are essentially in an existential crisis right now, because we've got survivors like myself who are saying, Well, cults like this need to be shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So those were some of my thoughts around the TV show. I think there was just too much missing. And it's also really interesting for a show to be produced. Sure, we want to tell the stories of the people who are in there and the people who are currently living there. Yes, that is reporting, that is journalism. But should we go and ask the abuser if the abuse has stopped? I don't understand how that makes sense, that we've got people like Noah Hopeful, who was a church leader at Gloriavale, is still currently a church leader making commentary on devotion. And we've got Peter Righteous making commentary on devotion. Now, Noah says it would be wonderful if we were not judged for the single action that somebody fails in.
Single action?
He says this on the show, a single action. So let's talk about that. We've got Hopeful Christian, I believe 10 counts of assault. We've got Fervent Ben Canaan, 8 victims. We've got Just Standfast, 20 victims. He was a school teacher. We've got children like as young as 5. We've got representative charges across all of, like, so many of these, which representative charges, for anyone who doesn't know, means that someone has been reoffending against the same person over and over. They bundle it into one charge because it's just not practical for the charge to be represented as multiple charges. So we've got Joseph Hopeful, who's jailed for sexual abuse. We've got Howard Temple, who was a primary church leader, who was brought multiple charges against him as well. So Noah is saying it would be wonderful if we weren't judged for the single action that somebody fails in. Verbatim, this is what he says.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you ask me if Gloriavale has reformed, my question would be, 1, no one knew that Hopeful Christian, who set up Gloriavale, was a sex offender. He knew. He raised Hopeful Christian as one of the primary leaders. He raised Hopeful Christian as the most powerful leader in that community. And he knew that he was a convicted sex offender who spent time in jail. Why is Noah still a leader here? And why are we taking any opinion from this kind of man on whether or not Gloriavale has reformed?
Yeah.
And I have the same question of Peter Righteous. So Peter Righteous is a leader on the show who makes commentary about, the past is the past, and we love one another, and we want to live in peace and live our way of life. Peter Righteous also was one of the core leadership who knew. He knew that Jonathan Benjamin was a sex offender. When I was young, Jonathan Benjamin lived with his family up in it was like a facilities shed up the back of Gloriavale. I obviously didn't know that this was why he was living there. I just thought, there's not enough room in the main hostels for him to live. Jonathan was a known sex offender. He was a known pedophile. When I was growing up, Jonathan was just a normal part of our lives. We ate at the dinner table with him. He taught the young people at the church choir.
What?
He played the piano for the church concerts. The police also knew that Jonathan was a sex offender, but because the victims had not pressed any charges, the police couldn't take action. So the victims, Peter Righteous says, the victims chose at the time not to press charges. And the piece that Peter clearly leaves out is that they teach we do not take any legal action. We deal with things and we trust God for it. So the victims didn't press charges because the church leaders told them not to press charges because it's not Christian behavior. So when pressing legal charges goes against your faith and your belief, then you're not going to press charges. So no charges were pressed. Jonathan Benjamin continues to live this way of life. He used to play the piano, and there's a very dark little alcove in the community. It's hidden in the back, and he would be allowed in that place where he would play the piano and he would teach us to sing. He would manage the choir. He was a conductor for the orchestra. All of this time, I had no knowledge of who he was or that I should stay away from him. And so you've got children walking around and parents walking around too, because a lot of the parents don't know either. They don't know that there's someone like this, even though this information has been given to the leaders and given to the police. These parents are not informed. So this happens over many years. Jonathan continues to reoffend. Jonathan has now been jailed. I believe it's 11 years. So he's been jailed for 11 years, and I think it was 20 charges, but you'll be able to check that online. So Peter Righteous is one of the core church leaders. He knows that Jonathan Benjamin has done this, and it continues to happen while Peter Righteous is in leadership there. So how come we are going and asking Noah Temple and Peter Righteous, who have both been complicit in the actions of a while being able to sexually reoffend over and over and over, if Gloriavale has reformed? Why are we asking them at all?
So much here, Lilia.
I know.